All right, folks. Hey, folks, I'm here with Danny Shaw. Danny Shaw is a professor, and he's traveled extensively in Latin America and studied the culture there. And he's also been to the Caribbean. And in light of recent events in Haiti, where we've seen the assassination of the president, UN troops are apparently on their way to the country, possibly US troops, definitely FBI, Department of Homeland Security heading to the country, rising unrest. We figured Danny Shaw was the person to talk to. And Danny, what is going on in Haiti? I mean, you were talking about Haiti a couple months ago, and people were kind of ignoring you. Now the whole world is looking at Haiti. What is going on in Haiti?
Yeah, Caleb, so important to have historical and ideological clarity right now. I was en route returning from Haiti in Florida, coming back to the Bronx when this all unfolded. Of course, it came as an enormous shock. In the words of one Haitian revolutionary leader, Patrick Matulius, he said he's in exile in Venezuela. He said we wanted to ouster the dictator, not off him. So the popular movement has had this massive campaign for years, since 2016, against Jovenel Moise, who never had a constitutional mandate to begin with, but they wanted it to be a people's removal, a mass movement to step into the vacuum of power, not the usual actors who masquerade as the international community. That term kills me. It's been killing me my entire life. Who the heck is the international community? That is a euphemism for the imperialist cabal. That's the true IC. Who is the United Nations? Well, it's the usurper nations, though hopefully China and Russia will use all of their diplomatic weight against this. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I was in Haiti. I woke up in Haiti the day before this all happened. So I probably caught the second to last flight out of there. Gasoline's at $10 a gallon. If you're lucky enough to even access this gasoline, there's an incredible scarcity. The sweatshops are churning out U.S. production as always, and they always have a big stamp U.S. aid. So that gives you a clear sense of where U.S. aid stands in Haiti. There's this big project called Savan Dian, where they produce stevia, other sweeteners. There's a lot of talk, too, about something to do now that CBD in the weed industry has all been privatized and commercialized. So Haiti has many, many uses. That's the number one fallacy or myth, that Haiti has no use. So it wouldn't come as a surprise that, again, they're going to send in the gunboat diplomacy, as it was called under Theodore Roosevelt. And a century later, what do we see again? And the headlines in the New York Times and CNN are absolutely painful, ridiculous, and hypocritical. They say Haiti asks for U.S. soldiers. Haiti begs. Hey, who is Haiti? So they throw out these terms. So the New York Times speaks for the 12 million people of Haiti? Did they interview any Haitians? So there's so much to unpack, and one of the contradictions of history is it's because of the death of a really unremarkable, unextraordinary, very ordinary, a great mediocrity, Jovenel Moise, just the latest puppet trying to maintain power, that we're having these important conversations. But if this is the way the teachable moment percolates, then so be it.
Well, now let's talk about the assassination itself. So we understand that two of the assassins were Haitian American U.S. citizens. The rest were former Colombian military folks. That's interesting, is it not? I mean, people are looking at this and asking questions. I guess I'll tell you some of my thoughts. Why don't you tell me your thoughts first, as someone who's far more familiar with the situation?
Yeah, in the media, they call this a bombshell, un bombazo. It doesn't get bigger than that. But the headlines in the U.S. are just like, yeah, there were 26 Colombians caught, mercenaries. And it's like, yeah, well, who coordinates all of the quote unquote anti-terrorism and anti-narco-terrorism in Colombia? Who has 9 U.S. military bases in Colombia? Who moves their soldiers and mobilizes them in Colombia freely, whether it's under Trump or under Biden, whether it's under the wolf or under the fox. Well, it's the U.S. government. So here we have a smoking gun, but we have a media that's completely uncritical. Caleb, can you imagine if one of those 26 Colombianos was like one-fourth Venezuelan, had a Venezuelan grandparent? This would be such a scandal. There goes Maduro. We have to invade Venezuela's security of the region. So certainly the left in Latin America, Cuban media, Venezuelan media, Bolivarian media, has it 100%. This narrative, if you ask me, I prefer, what do I really, really know? What's the sure bet? The sure bet is that U.S. intelligence is fully involved or that U.S. interests are going to benefit. That's what I can tell you 110% clearly. Can I document for you all of the conspiracy theories, who's behind the scenes? No, no one can. But right now, that's the narrative that we're seeing from the quarters that we trust, both within Haiti and outside.
Right. Well, Moise was unpopular. He was a U.S. puppet. He was presiding over, the failure of the country economically. People were rebelling in the streets. He was going to be forced out one way or another. And it almost looks like this was an attempt to preempt that, right? They didn't want him to fall at the hands of some kind of people's revolution. So he fell in this very nefarious and rather gruesome way. And now the U.S. troops can be sent in to stabilize the situation. It looks to me like this was a little bit of a controlled demolition, possibly.
I think you're correct. That's what they did to Rafael Trujillo. All the intelligence documents and the CIA assets, they came out years later in 1961. Rafael Trujillo, the infamous quote from the Secretary of State at the time, yes, Trujillo is a son of a, but he is our son of a. And that is how they looked at a Jovenel Moise. And that's how they're going to look at whether they pivot now towards an Ariel Henry or they pivot towards another mediocre NED trained Claude Joseph. The Haitian people don't care because the Haitian people are saying, okay, Jovenel Moise is gone. Of course, we lament the loss of life. Not all of them are saying that. There's no wide consensus. Some are saying, what do we care? We had the same hunger on Wednesday as we had on Tuesday. But they're saying that the U.S. is going to pivot now towards just a new face. And I think the analogy is fair to say that U.S. capitalism saw Trump as a liability. And what did they do? They pivoted towards this other face. If you want to call Biden another face, that would probably be to give him too much credit. But that's what they've done around the world. They saw how unpopular Moise was. It was unsustainable. So I think what you posit there is very, very likely.
Yeah, there was a similar situation in South Vietnam where you had some kind of ruling family that was incompetent during the Vietnam War. It's been documented that the U.S. imperialists just took out the ruling family and tried. What's that?
Noriega, Manuel Noriega in Panama. He refused to allow the Contras onto Panamanian soil. He was suddenly taking out the Christmas bombing. Let's not forget that Saddam Hussein was a U.S. Asset and used as a hitman against the Iranian revolution. People forget that in the wake of the U.S. orchestrated execution of Saddam Hussein.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you though, one key piece of the puzzle that I see a lot of American analysts just completely overlooking is that the opposition to Moise in the streets, I mean, the ongoing protests and rebellions that you have seen up close, it's not simply opposition to one man. I mean, it's very much pro-socialist, anti-imperialist, sympathizing with Venezuela, sympathizing with Cuba. Is that correct in your assessment?
Yeah, oh, definitely. That's one of the main demands. I mean, in the streets of Port-au-Prince, when we were marching, February, March, that movement was massive into April. It slowed down because the people had a people's victory. They overturned the referendum because Moise was trying to push things to the right, completely tone deaf, completely ignoring people's wishes. They were going to overthrow the People's Constitution of 1987. And that's when I arrived in Haiti. It was that Sunday, this was about 2 Sundays ago at this point, that the referendum was supposed to happen, but the Haitian ruling class, nothing happens in Haiti without the U.S. embassy weighing in the U.S. intelligence services. So one of the main demands, and I even saw in the streets of Port-au-Prince, Russian flags, and the incredible respect for Venezuela, even though Venezuela is going through one of its toughest times trying to resist the genocidal blockade, and I don't use the word genocidal lightly. And that's how I ended up in Haiti, by the way. I was coming back from Caracas. I can't fly New York, U.S. flight to Caracas, so I had to go through the Dominican Republic for the bicentennial celebration of Venezuela's independence battles, and that's what brought me to the island of Haiti, the land of many mountains, as the Tainos called it, and that's how I ended up being there. And the timing was crazy. But that's one of the main demands of the Salut Public, of the public transition, not just away from Moise, but away from the PHTK, the PHTK ruling party, which is still in power. So just like Fred Hampton said, you can assassinate a revolutionary, you can't assassinate the revolution. It's the same thing now with neocolonialism. You can remove one puppet, but you haven't removed neocolonialism.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the situation with Aristide, because it was a similar situation. So Aristide was ousted, and then the USA said, oh, we have to send in the military. It's just chaotic in the country. And this seems to be a game that they play. So they had their puppets in Haiti remove Aristide and fly him out of the country, right? That was back in 2004, I think. And then there was protests and rebellions going on, and they said, oh, we have to send in the military, to make sure he doesn't come back, basically. And that they use this. The USA sends its military into Haiti supposedly to help calm the situation or something, but it generally is about trying to push U.S. imperial interests and kind of hold back the people's revolutionary movement.
And the big controversy there too is that who led the 2004 quote unquote multilateral, multinational, because of course they prefer something that has the facade of humanitarian intervention, and U.S. boots on the ground doesn't look as good. It's not as picturesque or camera adequate. So it was 10,000 UN troops, blue helmets, 2,000 of which were Brazilian, led by ruling class Brazilian generals, who afterwards did tours in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, using their counterinsurgency skills from the ghettos of Haiti, then back in Brazil. So the internationalist connections are ridiculous. The Haitian people are going to resist organically any type of intervention. And with these cleanup, mop-up squads from the UN or from the OAS that they send in, they're going to organically come into conflict with the people, the masses. There's these gangs in Haiti. There's a fine line between the lumpen proletariat trying to organize itself in some type of way and picking up guns to defend itself and to defend their neighborhoods versus paramilitaries, or one of those gangs then contracted by the government directly, indirectly, like these Colombian mercenaries, to do their bidding. Things are very multi-layered and nuanced in the streets of Port-au-Prince. There's wars on different levels. Who's trapped in the middle? The everyday Haitian people who are not well armed. So they can send the UN in now to mop up these gangs that they don't have control of. People should look at Jimmy Cherizier. That's Barbecue. He's the #1 gang leader. He's on the front page of U.S. I think in the AP he was a front page story today. But he's had some revolutionary verbiage the past few weeks. And are we saying that we believe that? No, we're not saying that. Things have to be proven in the course of time. But again, like you're laying out, when has a UN occupation invasion ever assisted the everyday people of a country? And that's an important rhetorical question, I think, for the audience to turn towards.
Absolutely. And the ongoing problems in Haiti. I mean, you describe how, they have these sweatshops where people work in miserable conditions. You describe the hunger on the streets, the rising price of gasoline. These are the fruits of neoliberalism and of austerity. And again, we don't hear about it. If this was happening in a socialist country, they would tell us about it, and they would blame the conditions on socialism. But this is the free market neoliberal regime the United States has imposed on Haiti decade after decade after decade, resulting in poverty and suffering over and over and over.
So similar to what they've done to Mexico and the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico in a very different way, but all the similarities are there. So the internationalism right now, the solidarity with Haiti is very, very strong. There's different journalists and writers who've risked life and limb to get out a different version, the truth about what's happening in Haiti, to try to give a platform to Haitian voices, the very voices muted by the U.S. media. There's only one dominant diatribe. And this was, again, an instructive week for all of us in the anti imperialist movement because this was such a bombshell. Of course, the New York Times and the LA Times and the Wall Street Journal and BBC, everyone's looking for their soundbite. So they reach out, they see the press releases and they reach out to different activists and organizers. And when they don't like what you're saying, they strike that sentence. They strike that sentence. Oh, you mentioned neocolonialism. Oh, you mentioned the devaluation of the Haitian currency, which is called the good. Talk about neoliberalism. It's amazing that from Miami, from DC, from, again, the international community, quote unquote, they can determine and dictate that the good in Haiti, it's now 104 goods for $1. And that changes on a daily basis. And the Haitian people have to wake up, just like the Venezuelan people. The Bolivar now is at 3.3 million bolivares for $1. Having just returned from Venezuela, that means that a tube of toothpaste is $7 for a Venezuelan worker who's making $2 a month, if that. So these are things that we can't even comprehend. But when we try to bring up these talking points in the U.S. media, if they don't like what we're saying and we're too critical, they just go on to the next talking head who's going to give them the usual pro-imperialist cliches, which will then be the rationale. I mean, MSNBC was sickening this week. They had the corny ladies with fake crocodile tears in their eyes. Haiti again. So painful to watch. And though that's what they use to lure the U.S. population into thinking that we have to be so altruistic and send more of our soldiers. And all the headlines were Haiti's begging for troops, and then here come these arrogant American dreamers. There goes Haiti again. We're not going to solve their problems. And then that becomes the debate. So they've shifted the debate way to the right when we need to be having these conversations.
Right, that seems to be how they always frame interventions, right? Like there's always a group of people that are desperately about to be suffering, and the question is, should we have a soft heart and care for these people, or should we just, turn a blind eye? They never want to talk about the actual legacy of U.S. interventions and what they do and how they don't help the people. Often the situation that is used to justify the so-called humanitarian intervention turns out to be falsified or inaccurate to begin with, whether it's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or, Gaddafi was going to commit genocide in Benghazi, and then that turned out to be fake. And I mean, look, how many times has the U.S. sent troops to Haiti? How many times? I mean, over and over and over, right? And does it ever result in things just getting better? Not at all. I mean, I can't think of a single time where we hear a situation where the USA went there and, things just got so much better. And Russia has come out and said that I know that they feel like there could be geopolitical agendas behind some of this, and that the situation in the country could be used by the United States to serve its own geopolitical ends. Yeah, I mean, it's a situation the whole world is paying attention to, and I think that it's it's Telesur and Bolivarian aligned media that's giving the most accurate picture of events. Yeah.
And there's a great documentary, if you haven't seen it, and others, Kill the Bandits, because that's all. Every time there's a U.S. occupation or a UN occupation, which is the UN is a plaything in the hands of U.S. imperialism, it's always we're going after the bandits, we're going after the bad guys, which is carte blanche to go after the revolutionaries, the leftists, the popular leaders. They don't want the Haitian people to be armed, and that could be when the WikiLeaks documents come out, hopefully in a matter of hours and days, not months and years and decades, but that's what it will reveal. Just like in criminology, we always ask, well, who had a motive? If Port-au-Prince is awash with guns, and a lot of poor people from the hoods also have guns, and I'm not saying they're using those guns in a revolutionary way, but they have the potential to become some type of self-defense militias in the ghettos. And I think they exist on some level. How consciously is the debate. People, if people want to really get to the thick of this, they should watch. Well, so Kill the Bandits is very done. You'll find very well done. You'll find it on YouTube. And they go into Cité Soleil. Cité Soleil is the South Bronx of Port-au-Prince, and they just murder. The UN just murders. And Kevin Oliveira, the documentary filmmaker, risked his life to produce that in 2004. So very well done. Watch Democracy Now! On Thursday when we all awoke. We awoke on Wednesday, so the analysis didn't come in till Thursday. But watch, I don't know if you caught it, Caleb, but Democracy Now! Had this debate between IT Liberté, Haiti Liberty, which has been producing analysis, anti-imperialist analysis on Haiti for decades and decades, before it was Haiti Progress, IT Progrès. And then Daoud Andre, grassroots anti-imperialist organizer from Komokoda in Brooklyn. And the two of them duked it out about the gang issue. And I have to say, Caleb, I've never seen something so live, intense in terms of a debate. Amy Goodman was just let it rock, respecting both of the speakers. But it was the first time that we in the Haitian Solidarity movement and within the Haitian Liberation movement that this debate spilled out into the public arena. And I think people will enjoy that debate both for the right reasons and for other reasons. I'll leave it there so people click on that.
Well, let me ask you, who are the revolutionaries in Haiti? Is there a formal Haitian Communist Party? Are there revolutionary groups? Are there revolutionary leaders in the parliament? Can you tell us who the players on the ground that are anti-imperialist are?
Yeah, no question. There's incredibly well-trained, well-versed revolutionaries. I think we have to start with the Black Panthers of Haiti, Molegaf, Moleghaf, movement of all Haitians for equality and fraternity. That's who's I've been in touch with. I've got a lot of my training and vice versa, because that's what it is. What's the mark of a revolutionary in 2021? Training other revolutionaries. How do we multiply ourselves organizationally, ideologically? And Molegaf's doing that work in the trench towns, in the hoods. There's a bunch of good organizations. There's PAPDA. There's Parti Racine Pepla, the Party of the Haitian Roots. People should check out these organizations, set them up as speakers, which is easier said than done, because if you don't have internet and you don't have electricity, never mind internet in the hood, so there's this real gap. Here on the other side of the Caribbean Sea, Black Alliance for Peace and Code Pink, these organizations are doing incredible work. We have bi-weekly meetings of a Haitian Solidarity Committee that everybody should join. So that movement is there. When I was coming from Haiti, I was with an organization in the north, because I was far away from where Jovenel Moise got killed, because there's already a gang war, a paramilitary war. There's all these wars happening, which are not newsworthy. But then the president, who wasn't even a president with any constitutional amendment, so I don't know why, the headlines are the president, but the petty, mediocre dictator can't put that in the headline in the U.S., of course, who the U.S. supported, went down, and now people are asking all of these questions. But again, so be it. But those organizations are there. They're doing incredible work. Mouvement Paysan Papai, the Papai peasant movement. They do all this training. They have an ideological training school called Charmai Peralt. So just like in the U.S., I'll go out and say it. We have is it a strong left? Okay, we can have that debate, but we're there. we're there in many different forms and we're doing the work and we deserve some credit. Everyone's always like there's no robust left, but hey, there's a lot of dedicated revolutionaries and nobody on Instagram or YouTube has an excuse. Join an organization, join a study group, get up in all of these books, through different international revolutionary actors, get in touch and support the Venezuelan revolutionaries, the Nicaraguan revolutionaries. I'm so sick of this onslaught of news so one-sided against Nicaragua. Do you think the New York Times or the Washington Post or the right wing, they don't care about abortion rights in Nicaragua? They don't care about electoral democracy in Nicaragua. Don't fall for these salacious headlines, which are completely one-sided. 2018, it was a civil war. It was a coup. Sandinistas died. Sandinistas were tortured. So what they feed us, though. So even leftists, I think even well-intentioned people continue to fall. How much anti-imperialist training do you need to see through the one-sidedness of all the coverage, whether it's Nicaragua, Haiti, Venezuela? You can't find one positive word about Venezuela in the U.S. media since 1998 when the people came into power.
Well, thank you so much, Danny Shaw. You are the person I needed to talk to about this. Thank you for giving our viewers the lowdown on the situation in Haiti. We always learn a lot from you, so thank you very much, and I wish you the best in your continued efforts to raise awareness and raise solidarity with the Haitian people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Power to the people.
Yep.